Hello, everyone. Today I will be talking about my first ayahuasca experience. It is October 9th of 2018. My first ayahuasca experience was on April 28th of this year. So as you could see, I've taken a little bit of time to make this video. I recently posted a video of my preparation or how I was led to do ayahuasca. And I know that between videos it takes me a little time, but I am really honoring my guidance, my inner guidance as to when and how I should be doing this. I just came back. It's been a month and 9 days since I've come back from the jungle, and I did 4 ayahuasca ceremonies in the jungle, and it was amazing. But as you know, there is a lot of information. You have a lot of access to different types of information. Many of this information, ayahuasca gives it in a vibrational way, and it opens your mind depending on where you're at vibrationally and whether you can handle it or not. So it's like opening it's like removing many veils that are covering aspects of who you are, whether are veils created in this incarnation or others, and you're able to have access to all of that. I have to say that there are been days where I needed to rest, my body needed to rest. I came back from the jungle sick, and there has been days where awareness and understanding has come through, and being able to ground that information is important because it's information that you want to use in your everyday life. In my last video, I talked about how I was led to do ayahuasca till the day of my ayahuasca or my first ayahuasca ceremony. So picking up from there, I can say that I was told to arrive at the facilitator's house at 7:30. I was under the understanding that it was going to be a very small crowd, which is something that I wanted. I know there are places where they have huge amounts of people, and I knew that I didn't want to be in such a large group. I was under the impression there was going to be about 5 people. It ended up being 8, which is not bad at all. And counting the facilitator with 2 of her helpers was about 11 people. See, 8. Yeah, 11 people. She lived across a park district, which I thought it was great. And in my mind, my naive mind, I thought, well, if in any case, as I am under the influence of the plant, I need to walk through the forest, it's right there. When I arrived, there were already a few people there, so I was introduced to them, and little by little people were arriving. At some point, we were helping her to move furniture, clear the space, because we were going to do it in her living room. And I chose a corner. But you know, it's funny how your mind tends to second guess your choice, because after a while my mind was questioning whether I had picked the right spot or not. Of course I did. Later in the ceremony I realized why. But when we are preparing to do something like this, don't be surprised if your demons or your shadow or that aspect of you that you're not familiar with will create distractions and obstacles and that are fear-based, so that you walk away from it or that you change your mind. And even though I was doing a detox, so I was purifying my diet, my body, and I was purifying my thoughts with this mantra of I am infinite love, occasionally a thought, a negative thought would enter my reality to sort of shake things up and have me to change my mind. But I was very determined because, as you know, I encourage you to hear my video how I was led to this. I definitely had a lot of guidance and clarity that I needed to do this. So I settled myself down, and then, people start interacting. I was more on the quiet side because I wanted to be really focused, and I did not want other people's opinions to interfere with how I felt. There were this guy, he came with his friend. He was a guy, I would say, in his early 30s, and his friend was maybe a little bit older, late 40s. And he started to talk to me and share some of his past experiences with other plants. He had done other plants, and I was just listening. His friend seemed to be a little bit more shy, or maybe, he held back, and I didn't have a lot of opportunity to talk to him in the beginning. In the group, there were, let's see, 1, 2, 4 women, 4 female, and 4 male. There were 2 of us, 2 women that had not done ayahuasca before. It was our first time. And the rest, and there was 1 guy, he happened to have stage 4 liver cancer, and I didn't know that in the beginning. I later learned about that. And I think it was his first time too. It was during springtime, so you know how the days are longer, and it seemed that we had to wait, or we had to wait because it was too light out. At some point, the facilitator suggested that she was going to do some rapé, and if we were too interested in doing some. I didn't know what it was. And again, my mind went to that place of, oh no, you can't do that, especially after hearing that it gets administered through your nose. It's a powder that gets blown into your nose. And right away, I became afraid. But that part of me that was determined said, you know what, you came to do this. And if there is something else added to the experience, do it, because that's what you came here for. So I decided to do it. So I will make some videos about rapé ceremonies, but just so that you have an idea of what this is about. This is a powder that is made through a process of purification. It's a mix of tobacco with bark trees, and they have to become in a powder form. There are, like I said, there are different blends. It gets administered through the nose. The shaman or the facilitator has a little pipe that it blows it into your nostrils. They do feminine and masculine. I believe that your left is the masculine, the right is the feminine. Some people may vary or, say that it's different, but to me, that's how I understand it. And what it does, it helps to decalcify any hard matter made from mucus, it, surrounding your pineal gland, your membranes. It opens your mind and removes this decalcification, or that calcification, and it helps to calm the nerve system. To some people, it may make them purge, because sometimes you get lightheaded and nausea. But to some people, it makes them purge, or it makes them have the runs. You get instantly after, doing it, watery eyes, and it's funny, my eyes are getting watery as I speak. You get like a runny nose, because you're, expelling that mucus. And the sensation when you have it, it's like, you feel like this burning sensation in your head, and it all depends on the blend. Some blends are a lot more difficult than others. Some are gentle, some are tougher. But all I know is that the burning was quite intense. And she took time to do one side to the other, which I later found out that it was best to do it one after the other. This is where you're going to have different people having different understanding and different approach to do something. And I guess the most important part is that you connect to the person that is facilitating this ceremony. That's very, very important. So when I did the first round, I did a blend called Goddess. I felt that was totally appropriate, because it was about getting in touch with your feminine side. Then the second was Ascension. She was doing muscle testing to make sure that she got the right blend for each person right. Again, not everybody does it the same way. When I did the second round, I started to feel very nausea. And by then we were getting close to begin, the ayahuasca ceremony. And I was really hesitant to do the other side. So I asked her if it was okay for me to just do one side. And she said, well, of course it's okay if that's your choice. But ideally you want to do both sides, because you want to balance both sides. Then I decided to do the other side. And I had to sit in meditation, because I could feel quite nausea and lightheaded, very lightheaded. And I thought I was going to throw up. And, till that point, I did not have a very good relationship with the experience of vomiting. And for the ayahuasca ceremony, I had mentally prepared myself to do that. I totally surrendered and trusted the plant, and I figure if that's what she wants me to do, I will do it. So at this point, I was feeling that way, and I thought, well, if this is what I need to do, that's fine. But I didn't. So about, I would say 15 minutes later, we started ceremony. They closed the windows with, they said some plastic covers, dark plastic covers, even though it was dark, but they wanted to make sure that there was no light coming in. And then the facilitator started to explaining about the medicine and the people that she had done some of this medicine with in Peru. And then she said, you got to set your intention, come in front of me, and I will give you the medicine. I was the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was the sixth person to take the medicine. She started from the left side of the room. And I was sitting in meditation as other people were taking the medicine. As soon as this guy who had the cancer took the medicine, he started having a reaction to it. Some people were purging right away, and he was one of them. And he started to scream. So I remember that the guy who was, I was positioned in the corner, and the younger guy that I was talking to earlier, he sat right next to on my left and his friend on my right. And I just thought it was interesting that they had me in the middle. So I saw it as my two angels protecting me. I took it as a very positive sign. But it was funny because when it was my turn to take the medicine, the guy on my left got up and totally did not see me. Something that was very obvious, he didn't see me. And the facilitator was looking at him and looking at me like, wait a minute, it's her turn. But I took it as a sign, another sign that he needed to start, taking the medicine before me, that was, for whatever reason, something good. Ultimately was going to be something good. Then I took the medicine and I sat in meditation, and then I waited and I kept repeating my mantra, I am infinite love. I could feel how ayahuasca was settling in my stomach, and at some point I was feeling a little bit nausea, but because I was repeating that mantra, I could feel how she was working in a very loving way in my vibrational body. I didn't get high right away, or I didn't have the effects. I'll take the high back because you're not really high. You're in an altered state of awareness. I didn't get like that right away. So I could hear what was going on in the room and the purging and the screaming of this man. This man was positioned right in front of the facilitator, and he started twisting and turning and hitting the floor and kicking. I mean, his trip was very, very intense and negative. But I could see that he was fighting his demons. And I didn't know what he was saying, but vibrationally, I felt there was something very negative about it. At some point, I asked one of the facilitators or the helpers of the facilitator if I could go out, because even though you don't smell the vomit, because it doesn't have a smell, you hear your senses become intensified, and every noise you feel it like it's in you, it becomes you. And she said, no, you cannot leave the circle. So at that point I surrendered and lay down and turned myself towards the wall. And this is where ayahuasca started to dissolve my body. I could feel how everything was being dissolved except my nose and my upper lip. And I became consciousness. And then I realized that my concept of consciousness being somewhere above me or beyond me, it was wrong, that I was consciousness, and the only thing that was getting in the way of that was my mind. My mind created this concept of distance. Then she dissolved the two walls, and I shifted into another vibrational space, and these two men, their energy were protecting my physical body. Then she started turning, so at some point what this was, this area here dissolved, and I became pure consciousness. And this is when her lessons began. Lesson 1, that this physical construct is made out of the energy of love. And that everything in it, what makes everything cohesive or everything flow in the process of manifestation, is this energy of love. When we are translating information into physical manifestation, if this energy of love is not present, that manifestation will change. It has to change because it's a locking of the source of manifestation. So that energy goes into a state of recycling itself, where it dies to become something else. So it was telling me that our concept of unconditional love is very limited, because we only tend to think of love when we relate to our children, our family members, to our partners, and we have different degrees of that love, instead of just being able to channel love at all times, because our cells, it's made with this vibration. The particles that create the body and all of the organs is made, these particles contain light, but they also contain this vibration of unconditional love. And through a process of cooperation, they're able to create our body and our physical experience. So this is why life is not permanent, because if this energy, this cement, that it's diminished, everything dissolves and it has to go in a state of transformation. Lesson 2, that spirit creates our physical construct. And it showed me this psychedelic patterns, but it was to take me to the non-physical, and it put me in this void. And that's where it told me that our concept of light is also slightly off, because she said that we're very used to using our physical senses to determine our reality. So we're always validating what we know and understand through our projections into the world of matter, the world of form, shapes, colors. So we tend, as we internalize, we are using the third eye, and the third eye still is able to pick up those forms and the colors, the light. But when you go into a deeper space of vibration that comes from source energy, none of this is real or true. The perception is seen differently. And this is why, it told me that we tend to think as darkness always wrong or bad or negative, but it's not. That when there are massive events and a galaxy is created, that there are different gases, there are different vibrational states where the energy exchange or interact, and they're not necessarily seen as light. We only see it because of the way that we perceive reality through physical matter. Then it showed me the different degrees of energy or vibrational frequencies that spirit or consciousness, because I didn't see spirits, I saw consciousness, has to move through in order to enter to our reality. And one of the closest vibrational frequencies as consciousness enters that is closer to physical manifestation is the sacred geometry, because everything in our reality before it becomes physical has a blueprint, an imprint. And that imprint is what we see as energy. And when we see, and I'm sure for some of you who has done ayahuasca, you see how sometimes you see the symbols, the secret geometry, and you see all these symbols interacting with fractals. There is mathematic equations in all of the symbols, and that's what after that layer is that we get to create physical manifestation. So, it was showing me that. It was showing me, I could see at the meantime how my mind wanted to understand as he was explaining this, because he was explaining it to me not with words, but with an inner knowing. So I could feel how the energy of ayahuasca and my consciousness became one. And it was showing my consciousness through a vibrational language and inner knowing. Then at some point I could perceive how my mind was asking questions because he wanted to understand. Things were moving very quickly and my mind could not keep up with. So when my mind would do that, she would dissolve the mind, the thought, and then it would show me my inner knowing that I knew. So it kept bringing me to that, you know what you need to know. And when you need to understand this information, you will know. In the meantime, there was a part of me that was also aware of the room and what was going on in the room. And I kept hearing this poor man screaming and saying some words that sounded very demonic. And then I was drawn to, Ma, I want to help him, because I would feel the pain of the people in the room. And she told me that by holding the vibration that I was holding the space for every person there, that loving, unconditional love. And she told me that it was very important for me to learn these lessons, that not until I got this, not until I learned what self-love was about, that I could not help or heal anyone. So I would say, okay, Ma, okay, I love you. Thank you for that teaching. So I was always filled with gratitude as she was helping me open my eyes and understand. And I felt a lot of compassion for the people that were hurting there. And she was very motherly to me. And she kept saying that, I had this beautiful quality of feeling compassion, but I needed to have that compassion and love for myself. So that this experience was all about me. And I know that people says, you're not supposed to help, but, under the influence of the plant, I still had this very strong desire to help other people. That's just been always part of my nature. But that was the lesson that she was teaching me, that, I am not here to save the world. That first I need to save myself and love myself. And from that space, setting an example, then you can help others. And that was one of the greatest lessons that I got in this particular ceremony. It's about feeling my own power, my own love, unconditional love, and then to be able to feel the compassion towards others without interfering with their reality or with their life experience. Then I remember feeling really good and very happy. And I sat up in meditation because at that time I was laying down, and I sat up and I felt really, really good. And then by that time, the facilitator said, whoever wants to have a second cup, you're welcome to. And I remember thinking, I feel so good, but I want to prolong this. I was thinking this, right? Mine. I want to prolong this, so I'm going to take more ayahuasca. I didn't purge. Ayahuasca all turned into pure love inside of me. And I was feeling very good, very happy. And then I told the facilitator, is it possible for me to just have a very small cup? And she goes, sure. As soon as I took that cup, you guys, I knew I had made a mistake. But it was a lesson to learn, because ayahuasca said, you see, this is something that you do. When things are in perfect harmony, you let your mind get in the way and create doubt. And it wants you to do something to hold on to the moment and make more of it when you don't need to. All you need to do is be. So I recognized that I did do that I have a tendency to move when I don't have to, that I have a tendency to want to manipulate energy when it's not necessary. And in that moment I purge, and it was a very good purge. And after that, I felt really good, but I felt quite taken by the medicine. So I laid down again. And in this particular time, my mind became very active. And this is where ayahuasca was showing me the difference between mind and knowing. Because I didn't get the point right away. And I was, my mind kept asking and asking and asking questions. And for every thought that my mind would ask, ayahuasca would dissolve it. I would have another thought, ayahuasca would dissolve it. And it was like this game between mind and consciousness of to who it would give up first. Of course, my mind at some point gave up or gave in. And this is when I understood that she was teaching me the difference between this very strong desire that we always have, that I mentally want to understand an emotion or an intuition, and that sometimes in that wanting to understand, we contaminate the information, because that understanding goes through the filters of the mind, and the mind has a tendency to create many different mechanisms to protect us when we are in a state of fright or traumas. And a lot of times when we are not able to reconcile those traumas, we tend to become afraid or suppress, and then the mind will create more walls and veils to keep us running away from facing that emotion or that pain, that physical pain or emotional pain. And these are programs that are constantly working, that are creating a reality that is not true, that it's contaminated, it's not real. So she wanted me to understand that when I sense something, to not always translate it, to not always have this strong desire to know why, because I don't need to know why. All I need to know is trust and understand that the mind is not always going to figure it out, or can't, or is not always going to understand how things are going to play out, because it's not meant to know. That the mind is only there to help us become more physical focused, but not to figure things out. That it is our consciousness that is capable of doing that. So there has to be a surrendering and trust to the process. And a lot of times I would not know that process, but I will get the results that I do want. And that was very powerful. I am not going to say that I understood that right away. I understood it at a particular level, but as I integrated the information, I became aware of what she was wanting to say. She also transformed every cell of my being into love. I was vibrating pure unconditional love. And another lesson that she taught me was that I don't always have to go to the mountains and be with monks or with sages to be able to create this particular state of being. That what was needed was for the mind to relax and surrender completely. That will create a state of relaxation that every cell of my being, my nerve systems, and every other layers of my body would relax. And when all of these layers and levels would come together as one, that I would vibrate unconditional love. And that was our natural state. That's how basically we are in the moment of our birth. And that I could create this anytime I want to. So I understood that because in my head, I had had a Kundalini Awakening 20 years ago. And some of the teachings that I received back then by my spiritual teacher, I was under the understanding that we could only have a Kundalini Awakening under certain conditions, or that we could be enlightened under certain conditions. And ayahuasca was basically saying, no, there's many, you can create this by understanding what you need to do, and what kind of emotional state, vibrational state the mind, body, and spirit need to be in order for you to create that experience. So that was really good. And she just kept helping me feel this, like love. And I just was filled with gratitude and telling her, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing all this for me. I love you, I love you, I love you. And I remember as I was saying, I love you so much, Ma, she said, and do you love Sandra? And I said, yeah, I love Sandra. And she said, because I am you and you created me. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just like letting me know, like, you created this experience. You allow this experience to take place, and we're not that different. I'm just an aspect of your creation so that you could have the opportunity to have this experience. And I remember I sit up again by then, and I was feeling so happy and so loving and so good. So the guy next to me on my right, he was talking to the facilitator, and I think she was asking him how he was doing, and he was sharing something, and they were laughing. And at that moment, I became aware that I understood the vibration of the conversation. I didn't know what words they were saying, but I understood the vibration. So I started laughing too, and then they looked at me like, oh, so you're listening. And I was thinking, no, I'm not. I'm just listening to the vibration, so I get what you're saying. And then they started talking to me, and I was in such a loving space that I just told the facilitator, thank you so much for doing this and for letting me participate of your ceremony. And I feel a lot of appreciation. So I kept being that vehicle, or that conductor of that energy for everyone in the room. I later found out that everybody had a very rough experience, especially this guy that had the cancer. I later learned that he was swearing in his language, and he was fighting ayahuasca. I asked him at some point how he felt, and he said that he felt better, much, much better. But I was just in my bubble, and I was like that the following day. I didn't sleep that night. At some point, I went outside and looked at the stars and looked at the sky, and I spoke to a couple of people. And this guy, the two friends, the older one, that at first he was really apprehensive and shy, and he kind of looked like a little bit tough and whatever, his energy changed, and he was so beautiful. Like, he was very sweet, and he came and he hugged me and kissed me, and there was this connection that we all felt. And everybody was sharing their story, and here I am talking about unconditional love, while other people were just talking about they had really rough experiences with their family members. Not everybody did, but I felt very blessed, and I felt like it was a wonderful experience. And of course, after having my other ceremonies of ayahuasca, I now could see why ayahuasca chose to show me that. I am glad, because that has been the basics of my strength in my other ceremonies, is the memory, the remembering that I am unconditional love. I believe this has been pretty much my first experience. Stay tuned for my next video with my second ayahuasca experience. If you have any questions, I would love to hear what you have to say. You can email me at createharmonywithlove@gmail.com. Please leave your comments. And until next time, have a wonderful, wonderful week.